The soft blue glow of the television screen was the only light in the room, painting our faces in shifting hues of action movie cyan and explosive orange. It was a perfect Friday night, the kind of comfortable, unremarkable evening that I, Chloe, had come to cherish. The city outside my apartment window was a distant, humming thing, but in here, on my oversized sectional couch, it was just us, a fortress of fleece blankets and shared silence. Next to me, his feet tucked under the same blanket, was Jake. Jake, with his kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed and a steadiness that felt like an anchor in my sometimes chaotic world. We'd been dating for a little over a year, and we'd settled into a rhythm that was as comforting as the worn-out sweatpants I was wearing. Our relationship wasn't a whirlwind, it was a gentle, steady river. We knew each other's coffee orders, each other's work frustrations, and each other's preferred spot on the couch for a Netflix binge. Tonight's selection was a big-budget spy thriller, the kind full of car chases and quippy one-liners. It was his pick. I was more of a documentary or a quirky indie romance girl, but I loved these nights where I could just lean into his interests, feeling the rumble of the subwoofer through the cushions as another car spectacularly flipped on screen. "No way," Jake murmured, his voice a low vibration against my shoulder where I was resting my head. "That BMW would have shattered into a million pieces. The physics are all wrong." I smiled into his t-shirt. "Says the man who builds financial models for a living. Since when are you an expert on automotive physics?" "Since common sense," he retorted, squeezing my hand. His hand was warm, his grip familiar. This was our language. The gentle teasing, the physical closeness, the shared space. It was all so wonderfully predictable. During a lull in the action, a quieter scene where the hero was confronting his estranged father, I got up to make popcorn. The familiar scent of butter and salt soon filled the small apartment. When I returned, balancing 2 bowls and a fresh round of sodas, Jake had paused the movie. The screen was frozen on the hero's anguished face, a single tear track visible through the grime on his cheek. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting his bowl on the coffee table. "Yeah, just needed a refueling break," he said, but his voice had a strange, distant quality to it. He wasn't looking at the screen, he was staring at a fixed point on the far wall, his brow slightly furrowed. I settled back in, pulling the blanket up to my chin. "Okay, hit play. I need to see if he forgives his dad or just steals his supercar and leaves." Jake didn't reach for the remote. Instead, he turned to look at me. The blue light from the paused screen cast deep shadows under his eyes, making him look suddenly older, more serious. "Chloe," he began, and then stopped. He took a slow, deliberate breath, as if steadying himself for a sprint. My popcorn eating slowed. This wasn't his usual pre-movie discussion posture. This was something else. A tiny, cold knot began to form in my stomach. Was he sick? Had he lost his job? My mind, ever the anxious overachiever, started racing through a catalog of worst-case scenarios. "What is it, Jake? You're starting to scare me a little." He finally picked up the remote, but instead of pressing play, he pressed the power button. The room plunged into near darkness, the city's ambient light from the window now our only illumination. I could just make out the outline of his face, the set of his jaw. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said, his voice low and measured. "About us. About life. About everything." The cold knot tightened. About us. Those were rarely good words to hear in a darkened room after the movie has been abruptly turned off. I remained silent, my heart starting a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. He shifted on the couch to face me fully, tucking one leg underneath him. "You know I love you, right, Chloe? I really do. You're the most grounded, kind, amazing person I've ever known." A lead weight settled in my chest. There was a but coming. I could feel it hanging in the air between us, large and ominous. "I love you too, Jake," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He nodded, looking down at his hands as they fidgeted with the edge of the blanket. "I know, and that's what makes this so hard to say." He paused again, gathering his words. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. I could hear the faint wail of a siren several blocks away, a sound that usually faded into the background but now seemed deafening. Then he looked up, and his eyes met mine in the dim light. They were full of a turmoil I hadn't seen in them before. "I don't think I can live in a city anymore," he said. I blinked. Of all the things I was expecting, a confession of infidelity, a terminal illness, a sudden desire to join a monastery, this was not on the list. The air left my lungs in a confused rush. "What? The city?" he repeated, his voice gaining a little strength now that the initial words were out. The noise, the constant rush, the smell of exhaust and garbage, the fact that you can't see the stars at night. I feel like I'm suffocating here, Chloe. I have for a while. My brain was struggling to catch up. But, you've lived here your whole life. Your job is here. I'm here. I know, he said, his voice laced with a pain that was clearly genuine. And my job is mostly remote now. I've been looking into it. I only need to be in the office once a month, if that. Looking into what? I asked, a sense of surreal disbelief washing over me. We were just watching a movie about international espionage, and now we were talking about moving. Land, he said, the word simple and heavy. Out west. Montana, Wyoming, maybe even Idaho. A few acres. Somewhere with mountains in the background and quiet so deep you can hear your own thoughts. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man I knew, the man who wore tailored suits, who loved fancy cocktail bars, who could debate the merits of different fusion restaurants, with the person describing this pastoral fantasy. You want to be a farmer? The question came out more incredulous than I intended. A small, sad smile touched his lips. Not a farmer. Not really. Maybe just a guy with a big garden. A couple of chickens. A dog that has room to run. I want to build things with my hands, Chloe. A fence. A shed. I want to split firewood and heat my home with a wood stove. I'm tired of looking at spreadsheets and concrete. I want to see trees. Real, wild trees, not the sad little ones they plant in sidewalk pits. He was speaking with a passion I'd never heard from him before. This wasn't a whim. This was a deep, fundamental yearning that had clearly been brewing for months, maybe longer. And he had kept it from me. The realization stung. How long have you been feeling this way? I asked, my voice quiet. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. A year, maybe more. It started as a low-grade discontent. I'd see pictures online, documentaries about national parks, and I'd just feel this ache. But it's gotten worse lately. It's all I can think about. This life we're building here, it feels like a cage to me now. A cage. The word felt like a physical blow. Our life, our cozy apartment, our Friday night rituals, our friends, it was all a cage to him. I felt the foundations of my reality begin to tremble. The future I had so clearly mapped out in my head, promotions, maybe a bigger apartment in a better neighborhood, eventually a wedding, kids in a good city school, that future was dissolving into pixels, just like the frozen image on our dark TV screen. So what are you saying, Jake? I asked, my throat tight. You're just going to quit your job, sell your stuff, and move to the wilderness. I'm saying I have to, he said, his gaze intense. And I'm asking you to come with me. The silence that followed was absolute. The siren had faded, and the city itself seemed to be holding its breath. Come with me. The words hung in the air, not as a romantic proposal, but as a monumental, life-altering ultimatum. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting images. Jake chopping wood in a plaid shirt versus Jake shaking hands with clients in a high-rise. Me, tending to chickens in a muddy yard versus me leading a presentation in a sleek conference room. The vibrant, chaotic, culturally rich tapestry of city life versus the stark, silent, and, to me, terrifying emptiness of the countryside. Jake, I'm a graphic designer, I said, my voice trembling slightly. My world is here. My inspiration is here. The museums, the galleries, the street art, the energy, that's what fuels me. I can't just design logos for local feed stores. You can work remotely too, he argued, leaning forward. Your job is even more flexible than mine. Think about it, Chloe. Waking up to silence. Drinking coffee on a porch overlooking a valley. The air smelling like pine and rain, not bus exhaust. At night, the sky would be so full of stars it would look fake. He was painting a beautiful picture, but to me, it was a picture of isolation. Of being cut off from everything and everyone I knew and loved. What about our friends? Our family? My sister is here. Your parents are a 2-hour drive away. We'd be alone. We'd have each other, he said, and the simple faith in that statement broke my heart. And we'd make new friends. A different kind of community. Besides, it's not the 1800s. We'd have internet. We can visit. It sounded naive. It sounded like he was so consumed by this dream that he wasn't considering the brutal, practical reality of it. The loneliness, the hard physical labor, the distance from emergency services, from good hospitals, from the life we had spent a decade building. You're serious about this, I said, the finality of it dawning on me. This wasn't a hypothetical discussion. This was a plan. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, he replied, his voice soft but unyielding. I've been looking at properties online. There's one in western Montana, 20 acres with a small, run-down cabin. It's affordable. It needs a lot of work, but it feels right. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and sudden. I turned my face away, looking out the window at the glittering skyline I called home. Each light was a person, a story, a life intertwined with mine. To leave it felt like tearing out a part of my soul. You've been planning this without me, I whispered, the betrayal sharp and fresh. You've been looking at land, researching, building this whole future in your head, and you didn't say a word. I was scared, he admitted, his own voice thick with emotion. I was scared you'd look at me like you're looking at me right now. Like I've lost my mind. I was scared you'd say no, and then I'd have to choose between the woman I love and the life I feel like I'm meant to live. And now? I asked, turning back to him, the tears finally spilling over. Now you're forcing that choice. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it away, tucking it under the blanket. The gesture felt like a chasm opening up between us on the couch. I'm not forcing anything, Chloe. I'm telling you the truth. The whole truth. I can't keep pretending. Every day I spend in this apartment, in this city, I feel a little part of me dying. I can't do it anymore. I have to go, and I want more than anything for you to be by my side. We sat in the dark for a long time after that. The conversation cycled through the same points, his dreams, my fears, the practicalities, the immense, terrifying gamble. He talked about the freedom of it, the authenticity. I talked about the security we had, the community we were part of, the sheer madness of throwing it all away for a vague ideal. It was a fundamental clash of values, of souls. I loved the man he was here, the urban, sophisticated, reliable Jake. He was asking me to love a potential version of himself, a rugged pioneer I had never met and wasn't sure I wanted to know. The night wore on. The movie remained unwatched. The popcorn grew cold and stale in its bowl. We eventually fell into a fitful, separate sleep on opposite ends of the couch, the blanket a sad no man's land between us. The following weeks were the most difficult of our relationship. The easy comfort was gone, replaced by a tense, polite distance. Every shared moment was now viewed through the lens of the decision. A nice dinner at a new restaurant was tinged with the thought, would this even exist there? A walk through the bustling farmers' market felt like a farewell tour. We went to couples counseling. We talked until we were hoarse. I tried, I really did. I looked at the pictures of the land in Montana. I researched the towns nearby. I tried to imagine a life where my biggest concern was a bear getting into the trash, not a client rejecting a third round of revisions. I couldn't make the image stick. It felt like a costume I was trying on that didn't fit, a role I was utterly wrong for. Jake, for his part, became more resolute. He gave his notice at work. He started selling his furniture. The dream was no longer an abstraction, it was a moving truck and a checklist. The man I loved was packing his life into boxes, and my heart was packed away with them. The end came on another quiet evening, though this time we weren't on the couch. We were standing in his nearly empty apartment. The truck comes tomorrow morning, he said, his voice echoey in the barren space. I know, I replied, my arms wrapped around myself. He looked at me, his eyes holding a universe of sorrow and unshakable conviction. I can't ask you to come again. I see what it's doing to you. And you can't ask me to stay. We'd both end up resenting each other. I nodded, fresh tears streaming down my face, but they were tears of acceptance now. Of a deep, profound loss. He was right, love wasn't always enough to bridge certain chasms. Sometimes, love meant letting the other person follow their star, even if it led them out of your sky. I will always love you, Chloe, he said, pulling me into a final, tight embrace. I breathed in the familiar scent of him, memorizing it. I'll always love you too, Jake, I whispered into his chest. I hope you find your peace. I hope you see all the stars. He kissed my forehead, a soft, lingering goodbye. Then he picked up his last duffel bag, walked out the door, and out of my life. That was 2 years ago. The pain was immense, a hollowed-out feeling that took months to fill with something other than grief. I threw myself into my work, into my friends, into rediscovering the city I loved on my own terms. It was hard, but I healed. I still live in the same apartment. I still watch Netflix on my big couch. Sometimes, I get a notification, a like on an old, shared photo from a social media platform we both used to use. Out of curiosity one day, I looked him up. He has a new account. The profile picture is not of his face, but a breathtaking landscape, A snow-capped mountain range reflected in a still, blue lake. There are very few photos, but the ones he has are telling. A small, rustic cabin, now looking lived in and repaired. A garden bursting with vegetables. A goofy-looking dog covered in mud. And in one picture, a shot of his hands, calloused and strong, holding a cup of coffee on a wooden porch railing, with the vast, empty wilderness stretching out behind them. He looks happy. He found his quiet. He found his stars. And me, I found a different kind of strength. The strength that comes from honoring your own truth, even when it breaks your heart. I learned that the most unexpected sentences aren't always the start of a horror story. Sometimes, they are the painful, necessary beginning of two separate, authentic stories. We were watching Netflix. Then he said something I didn't expect. And it shattered my world, but in the breaking, it made room for a new one to be built, a world where I am, unequivocally, myself. And sometimes, that's the truest story of all.